Hi and welcome to the channel and my video on how I rate my top 10 David Bowie albums. Bowie, for me, especially through the 1970s, was one of the artists you just had to follow. You never knew what direction he would go in. Through David Bowie, I got into the music of Iggy Pop, Lou Reed, the Velvet Underground, the writings of Robert Heinlein, science fiction writer, and the films of Nicholas Roeg, and so much more. So, without further ado, coming in at number 10, Scary Monsters and Super Creeps. When I was doing this video, I kind of flip-flopped with Lodger for this position, but at the end of the day, I've got to give it to Scary Monsters, because there's one great track after another. Scary Monsters is considered by many critics as Bowie's last great record, and a benchmark for all the albums that followed it. One critic wrote that Bowie with this album has achieved the perfect balance between creativity and commercial success. In the whole album there isn't a weak track, and vocally Bowie is just superb. Somehow with this album Bowie had ridden out all the changes that punk and new wave had brought and still remained relevant. Highlights for me got to be the title track Scary Monsters and Super Creeps with Robert Fripp's awesome guitar. Teenage Wildlife, was this a barb aimed at Gary Newman, then called the new Bowie? Lyrics, one of the new wave boys in the same old drag comes sweeping into view and as ugly as a teenage millionaire. Ashes to ashes as Bowie looks back at poor Major Tom, now a decade older and a strung out junkie on an all-time low. The video accompanying this track was the most expensive ever made up to that time, cashing in at a whopping £250,000. Coming in at number 9, The Man Who Sold the World. I've included a picture of the original American album sleeve. It's very, very odd. In late 1970, David Bowie still seemed to be an artist searching for an identity. Most dismissed him as a one-hit wonder, Space Oddity. So The Man Who Sold the World came as a bit of a shock. Best way I can describe this album is Bowie combines Black Sabbath, Iggy Pop, The Velvets, stoner rock on a bunch of disturbing otherworldly songs about insanity, religion, technology and war. I have no idea at the thinking behind this album, as it was always going to sell poorly at the time. And sure enough, it did. Though when Bowie's career exploded, a few years down the line, fans went back and revisited the album, finding what could have been a forgotten classic. Highlights include Width of a Circle, All the Supermen and the title track, which hints of things to come. Around this time, David Bowie gained a certain notoriety by turning up to press interviews in a long silken gown. In his first interview with Rolling Stone, he wore the gown. I refuse to be thought of as mediocre, Bowie said. If I am mediocre, I'll get out of the business. There's enough fog around. That's why the idea of performance as spectacle is so important to me. Tell your readers that they can make up their minds about me when I begin getting adverse publicity. When I'm found in bed with Raquel Welch's husband, like I said, the whole interview was conducted in the gown. At number 8, I've got the album Aladdin Sane. When this album was released on the 13th of April 1973, David Bowie didn't need any gimmicks. He was at the height of his popularity, especially here in the UK. The album's release was preceded by a massive advertising campaign that had billboards put up throughout the country with just the iconic lightning bolt album cover and the words underneath, Aladdin Sane. I think at the time there was so much pressure on David to make another great record. Probably too much. At the time, critics gave lukewarm reviews, saying that it was a poor parody of the Rolling Stones, style over substance. Thankfully today, the record is regarded as the classic it is. First track, Watch That Man, Bowie's nod to the New York Dolls, the avant-garde jazz of Aladdin Sane, the Bo Diddley stomp of Gene Genie. The album's packed with great songs, though the only criticism I'd have is rather than do a cover of the Rolling Stones' Let's Spend the Night Together, I would have liked to have seen John I'm Only Dancing included on the album. It was only 4 months later Bowie would go on to kill the Ziggy Stardust character. At the Hammersmith Odeon on the 3rd of July 1973, he announced that this would be the last concert he would be performing as Ziggy Stardust. And in his own words, it was an attempt to get his life back. Coming in at number 7, Hunky Dory. When this album came out near Christmas 1971, I was wandering around the record shops in London's West End, and I decided to take a chance on this record. I was expecting something along the lines of The Man Who Sold the World. I was stunned by the new direction Bowie had taken. Rick Wakeman, who played piano on the album, says hearing the songs for the first time, said this was the finest collection of songs I'd ever heard in my life, and I couldn't wait to record them. The invention, the scope of this album is incredible, from the pop rock of Changes, the epic sweep in Life on Mars with a string arrangement courtesy Mick Ronson, the charming Kooks, and the disturbing Bewley Brothers. It's a wonderful album. And anyone who can include the lines, "She's so swishy in her satin and tat, in her frock coat and bibbidi-bobbidi hat. Oh God, I could do better than that," always has my undying admiration. Also, Bowie had laid the foundations of what was to come, as his band now consisted of Woody Woodmansey on drums, Trevor Bolder bass, and Mick Ronson on guitar. Coming in at number 6, Heroes. After Low the previous year, no one knew quite where Bowie was going to go with his next album. It was said that it would be part 2 in a trilogy of albums. What can I say? The first side of this album is just stunning. Though I guess if you combine Eno, Bowie and Fripp, it's kind of what would result. Throw in a funk rhythm section and you have it. It shouldn't really work, but it does. For those interested in where some of this music comes from, check out Brian Eno's early solo career. I think it's up to Another Green World and King Crimson's Red, and you'll see what I mean. Side 1, Beauty and the Beast, Joe the Lion, Heroes, Sons of the Silent Age, Blackout, they're just all stellar songs. I must admit though, I found at the time side 2 a little boring, but over the years I've grown to love it. And the final track, The Secret Life of Arabia, I just love that track. It just seemed to be tagged on the end of the album, and like I say, it's one of my favourite Bowie tracks. That rhythm guitar is off the scale. Number 5, Young Americans. Ch-Ch Changes was the perfect song for David Bowie. Who could have expected Ziggy Stardust to now be delivering an album of, as Bowie himself put it, plastic soul, and doing it perfectly? It's like he'd been doing it all his life. So many artists, so many white artists back then tried to do black music, soul, rhythm and blues, and they failed. But Bowie does it, and he does it magnificently. So much so, he was scoring hits on the soul and rhythm and blues charts. And he even appeared on America's Soul Train. I think up to that point, he was the first white artist to appear on that program. But Bowie said many times that he himself disliked that album, and if he'd been presented to that album as a teenager, he would have smashed it over his knee. In the UK, Bowie lost quite a lot of fans who didn't like his transition to soul and R&B. Me, I loved it. It's an album you can revisit over and over again and find new things on it. It takes a long time for Young Americans to fully reveal its gifts. Bowie knew that if he was going to be considered as a great artist, he had to keep changing and find new challenges. A young Luther Vandross arranges and sings on the vocal harmonies. All the musicians are top notch, but I'll have to give a special mention to David Sanborn, who plays sax. He plays his socks off. Fame, Win, Somebody Up There Likes Me, Fascination, just one great track after another. I was once in a New York nightclub and Fame came on, and I tell you what, it would have made a dead man dance. You could feel the bass lines shaking the floor. I'm surprised the speakers didn't blow, and then it was followed by Fascination, and like I say, everybody in the club was dancing and going absolutely apeshit. It was just incredible. Coming in at number 4, Station to Station. Bowie recalls this period as the darkest days of his life. He says a time so steeped in awfulness that recall of it is nigh on impossible. Still, in the midst of all that, Bowie managed to produce yet another masterpiece. It's a strange, weird record that somehow links the funk of Young Americans to what came next, Low. I still haven't a clue what the title track is all about, but it's a magnificent roller coaster ride. It's not the side effects of the cocaine. Should I believe I've been stricken, does my face show some kind of glow. For this album, Bowie employed Professor Roy Bittan from Bruce Springsteen's E Street Band. Roy is a magnificent keyboard player, and I've heard from many people that he held these sessions together. And it's Roy who leads the band through the title tracks, 10 minutes or so of sheer brilliance. Golden Years has some of the best hand claps committed to record, and it gave us another chance to see the Thin White Duke performing on Soul Train. Looking so sharp, it's surprising he didn't cut himself. Stay, TVC15, and Bowie turns in a stunning vocal performance on Wild is the Wind. I can remember one of the session musicians talking about his performance on this track and saying, quite literally, my jaw dropped. I was speechless. At number 3, Diamond Dogs. I bought this as a cassette tape when it came out, and I played it so much I wore the tape out. It's not everyone's favourite David Bowie album, I know, and I always thought it was kind of cobbled together. Around this time, Bowie had wanted to do a musical production of George Orwell's 1984, as well as a Ziggy Stardust musical, and some of the songs are rescued from those projects. At times, the album has a almost tarted up demo feel. For example, Future Legend, with its crowd noises stolen from a Rod Stewart concert. I find the whole album hugely enjoyable. Diamond Dogs, with some of Bowie's coolest lyrics. That Halloween Jack is a real cool cat, and he lives on top of Manhattan Chase. The elevator's broke, so he slides down a rope onto the street below. Oh Tarzan, go man go. Meet his little hussy with his ghost town approach. Her face is sans feature, but she wears a dolly brooch, sweetly reminiscent, something mother used to make. Wrecked up and paralysed, Diamond Dogs are stabilised. Candidate, Sweet Thing. Those two songs contain some of Bowie's finest vocals. No other vocalist in rock history could carry a song quite like David Bowie. Rebel Rebel, that incredible riff, the awesome, majestic Big Brother, and the dance of the ever-circling Skeletal Family, which to me still sounds fresh and original after all these years. On the cover, David still has his Ziggy Stardust haircut, but is morphing into something else. At number 2, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. I did a full detailed album review on this, and there's a link in the description. But what I will add here, it's where Bowie looked around at the musical landscape. Alice Cooper was just on the verge of becoming a megastar. Mark Bolan and the beginnings of glam rock. Blended it all in with a mix of Iggy Pop, the Velvets and the Rolling Stones. Assembled one of the greatest bands of all time and produced a masterpiece. And at number 1, Low. And I never would have thought this when I bought this album, I would ever rate it so highly. But over the years, it's grown and grown and grown on me, and I recognise it for the work of genius that it truly is. Can you believe that back in the day, RCA refused to release the album for 3 months, fearing poor commercial performance? Upon its release, Low divided critics and received little promotion from RCA and David Bowie himself. Still, it got to number 2 on the UK albums charts and number 11 on the US Billboard 200. David Bowie was always a man who observed what was going on around him in the musical world. He drew for this album on the influences of German music, bands such as Tangerine Dream, Harmonia and Kraftwerk. And Bowie also pulled in for the first time Brian Eno. Side 1 seems like a collection of fragments of songs. Speed of Life, Breaking Glass, What in the World, Sound and Vision, Be My Wife, A New Career in a New Town. At the time, I just didn't get it. I just thought, Bowie can't be bothered anymore. He's just thrown away these kind of like demo songs. You know, he hasn't even bothered to finish these songs. And it was only in the next year or so that I started to understand what the album was all about. Angus MacKinnon, a music journalist at the time, wrote, Bowie has always changed characters and personas. Over the course of side 1 of Low, he makes the ultimate transformation. He disappears. But for me, Bowie made an album that sounded nothing like anything before or after. An album that creates its own universe. And that is genius. Side 2 of the album is what opened me up to listening to ambient music. Eno, Fripp and Eno, Cluster and many more. To try and describe side 2 of Low in a few words is almost impossible. It's haunting, it's beautiful and it's unique. And like I said before, nothing sounded like it before or after. It is a work of genius. When I was doing my research for this video, I came across this. David Bowie recorded music for the soundtrack for the film The Man Who Fell to Earth. When Bowie presented these tracks to Nicholas Roeg, the director decided that it would not be suitable. One of these pieces was Subterraneans. 6 months after Bowie's proposal was rejected, Bowie sent Roeg a copy of Low with a note stating, "This is what I wanted to do for the soundtrack. It would have been a wonderful score." So thank you for listening to our video. I'd love to know what your top 10 Bowie albums are. I'm sure they're going to differ from mine, but I'd love to hear what your choices are. Stay safe, stay well, please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.